Abraham Lincoln did not care about black people and was openly racist. The difference that people need to understand and I'll try to explain is the difference between Lincoln being anti-slavery but not pro-black, as well as him only really doing things that would be perceived as pro-black, only when it either benefited him or his agendas. Firstly, to dispel the biggest misconception around Lincoln and arguably also the Civil War, it was not fought from the Northerners' perspective or Lincoln's perspective to end slavery. It was from the Southerners, however. From the Southerners' perspective, it was to keep slavery as an institution because they needed it to profit. It was so profitable, they just wanted that. You know, it's for states' rights, essentially. For the Northerners, it was to stomp out a rebellion and to keep the nation unified. It was started, though, however, because of slavery, even from the Northerners' perspective, in a way. They left because an abolitionist took office. Him being an abolitionist, though, doesn't mean that he still saw black people as equals. He just didn't see them as low enough to be slaves because he did not like slavery was repulsive because it is. I mean, I don't really have to go into depth. I mean, it's slavery, but he did not care about it. He literally said it. He literally said, and I quote, "My paramount objective in this struggle is to save the Union, and it is not either to save or to destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slaves, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps to save the Union." He literally said this. He, I'm not even exaggerating. This is a complete quote from him. Cut this out. But on the topic of the Gettysburg Address, it did state that all slaves would be free on January 1st, or the first day of the New Year's, 1863. But if you read between the lines, it was a political move. It was to give the war a better motive to keep fighting. Because at that point of time, the support was kind of waning. The people in the North were like, we don't really care. Like, why risk our lives just to stomp out a rebellion and to force these people that we don't care about and they don't impact us at all to stay in our union? We don't care. So they changed tactics. They made it about ending slavery because you can't really, there's not really a more noble cause that you could fight for other than, I guess, I don't know, saving the world. Ending slavery is so noble and it worked. It worked beautifully as a tactic, but only as a political tactic was it done. Black. It did also allow black people to help serve in the war on a more wide scale. People, like in schools, they portray black people as helping a lot, but they weren't allowed to for most of it. Up until the Gettysburg Address, they just were not allowed to help at all, unless they were working overseas. Then they were allowed to. But when they did start to join, when they were allowed to, they were still segregated. They were forced to stay separate. And before the Gettysburg Address, many in the South would leave the South to go to the North and were labeled as contraband or illegal, something that was illegally exported. So they started to send them to these awful camps, think like concentration camps, with such a dense amount of people, no space, no food, no water, and just disease running rampant. It was awful. But on the topic of the Gettysburg Address, once again, people didn't think he would actually do it. People thought he would fold and that he wouldn't follow through his promise. He did, though. So you have to definitely commend him for it. Even though he still promoted segregation, he did end slavery. It's a very complicated gray area for ending slavery. He technically said all slaves would be free, but he never passed legislation making it illegal to hold slaves. So yes, you are free. But if someone holds you in slavery, we can't punish him. We can't stop him. It's a gray area. So he did technically free the slaves, but it just led to the Jim Crow laws and using prison as slavery and debt peonage and an arguably worse form of slavery in the South. So while he did technically end it, he didn't really. And other things that could be seen as good, such as him promoting 40 Acres and a Mule, was done for a very bad. It's a really gray reason. It's both really bad and kind of understandable. He wanted them to stay segregated. He wanted them to even self deport themselves to Africa. That's what he wanted them to do. The other alternative was just to keep them segregated in this other area called 40 Acres and a Mule. It'd all be just Instead of being spread across the United States, he was just concentrated in one small area. He did this because he wanted to stave off further disagreements and decrease the likelihood of like race wars. So it arguably was a good reason, but he still wanted them to segregate themselves. And whether segregation for any reason is good is kind of up to debate. Yet again, it's a really big gray area. But I do believe that he was a good president and relatively good person, at least for the times. But if he was alive now, people would hate him. And he would be labeled a racist because he was. He made a good impact and did things like form the Republican Party. But we shouldn't have this image of him portrayed as this pro-black abolitionist, almost godlike figure. He was not someone that really liked black people. He saw them as worse than him. But he did at least lessen the effects of slavery, not as nationwide. So I would say he was human and did also think in the short term, where he let an avid racist be his vice president and to try and promote unity because it's like a northerner who's an abolitionist and an avid slave owner racist South person being his vice president. It does kind of show a bit of unity, but he didn't think about if he ever died and then that person then becoming his successor. He did not think about that, and he should have. Abraham Lincoln wasn't all good or all bad. I'm not trying to say that he was evil or a terrible person. I just think we need to put an asterisk next to his name and think about him and other presidents like him, such as Theodore Roosevelt, more critically. Not just say, oh, they're good for the times. No, that doesn't matter. You're promoting slavery and things like slavery. You just can't defend that. I don't care if it's acceptable for the times. You should still be held accountable. You were still bad. You still did very bad things. So I think he still should be seen more